Alright, so the next part is what I consider to be the fun part, and that's coloring it. I'm going to start by, first thing I'm going to do is, these eyes are kind of bugging me, just the placement of them, so I want to deal with that before I really go any further and start coloring. So I'm going to see if I can squeeze that down to look a little bit better. You just spread them apart a little bit. So that looks a lot better to me. So the first thing I'm going to do whenever I start coloring is I made my image a pretty decent size to do my line work. And for line work, that's really nice because you get really nice crisp edges with your brush. But whenever it comes to coloring and adding effects, and whenever you get a lot of layers, that can really start to use up a lot of RAM and slow down your machine. So the first thing I'm going to do is go back to my image size, and I had this at 3000 by 3000 and then I increased it. So I'm going to go back down to 3000 by 3000 for the color. Give that a minute to process. Okay, so I want to, the next thing I want to do is just kind of organize my layers. So I have kind of my sketch layer, my line layer, and then I have a new layer that I'm going to start. All these guys are my old thumbnails, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete, and then I'll name these layers. That's just a duplicate of the staff I pulled off to the side, so I don't know if I'll use that for anything, but may need it. Alright, so, and then I'll have base color. So I'm going to start coloring with, basically what I'm going to be doing is what's called flatting, and I just put flat colors all over everything, and I'm just going to do this with shades of gray, so I don't really have to worry about color much at this point. I just kind of want to get the tonality of everything figured out, and I want to do this not with my paintbrush but with my pencil tool. And the reason I want to do this with my pencil tool is because it gives me a pretty crisp edge. If I come in and I start painting with my pencil tool here. Let me zoom in a little bit so you can see what's going on. You'll see that I don't get a soft fall off. So whenever I do a selection, it will select right around those pixels, and I don't get a fall off. So sometimes when you're doing selections and you use a paintbrush, it can give you some weird lines in your selection because you have a fall off on your brush. If you use a pencil, you don't have a fall off, so that kind of it just helps out. It's going to give you cleaner colors, cleaner lines, and it's just going to help quite a bit whenever you go to color. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to flat the entire thing. So I'll just pick a gray color, a medium to dark gray. You can always change this later, and I'm just going to start flatting this guy out, and I'll show you why the pencil tool is kind of helpful. It'll make sense in a minute. but I'm going to start just by making a fairly small brush and just kind of coloring in. It's okay to go outside of the lines. I think it's a little easier to do to go outside of the lines at first and then kind of go back and let me turn that off just so I can see better, and then go back and erase what is inside of the lines. So I'm just going to kind of outline this whole thing to begin with. And you're going to have areas where your line work doesn't necessarily meet up, and that's okay. A line is basically defined as two different colors. So a line doesn't necessarily mean a black line like this. Anything where you have two different colors like this gray and this white is considered to be a line. So if you have areas like right here in the hand that's kind of broken, you can still make the line, just kind of close that in. And I'm basically going to, after I get all this sort of outline, I'm just going to fill it with the paint bucket. And the fact that I'm using the pencil and not the paintbrush will kind of help with that. And I'll show you what happens whenever you use a paintbrush and you try to use this method. It's just easier to use the pencil tool. It keeps things nice and clean for you. So I'm not going to record me flatting the entire thing, just kind of the basics, and then I'll do the same thing I've been doing and just cut to me doing everything sped up, so you don't have to sit through the entire recording of me painting. So once I have this guy completely outlined, I can just go to my paint bucket tool and I can fill him in. Now basically, because I use the pencil tool, it fills in really nicely, except for areas like that I can just fill in. Now if I were to use my paintbrush tool, so let me go back to my paintbrush tool and make an outline like that, and then go to my paint bucket tool and fill that in, you're going to get this white line. And that's just because you have a fall off and the paint bucket has a threshold, so it won't let you kind of go all the way to the edges like that with the paint bucket. So that's why I use the pencil tool. Now I went out of lines in a lot of areas, so in order to correct that, I'm going to use my eraser, but I want to use my eraser. I want to use a let's see if my eraser has a pencil tool. Yeah, I want to use my pencil eraser, so that way I get those same, but I don't want. Let's see. No, that's not really what I want. So I'm just going to use my regular eraser, and I'm zooming in and I'm getting really close, and I'm just erasing everything that's slightly outside of the line. So this is kind of tedious, but it goes pretty quickly. It's one of those things where, you know, you put some music on, it may take you, 15 or 20 minutes, but that's going to go by pretty quickly. I'm just going to deal with this staff first. And when I'm done flattening this out with one solid color, the whole thing one color, then not only do I have a nice starting point for coloring, but I also have a mask. So if I want to use my sketchiness, my sketchy lines, I can use that mask to sort of mask everything that goes outside of the lines that I don't want, like the where the hand may have originally been in a different place or something like that. So I can use this flat color as a mask, and I'll show you how to do that in just a second, as soon as I finish what I'm working on here. It's kind of a toss-up. If you want to spend the time and getting in the lines, that's fine. For me, it's easier. My brain works easier if I color the whole thing first, and I don't really worry about going outside of the lines, and then I can come in with my eraser and erase everything that I don't want. Or you can do both. I kind of got in the lines for the most part, and then I just went outside of the lines in some areas. That makes it kind of easy to clean up. And as always, don't get too obsessed about making everything absolutely perfect. Having little imperfections, I think, is what makes it look kind of dynamic and gives it character and gives it life. If you have still some sketchiness and some roughness to it, and if you miss a spot like that, don't worry too much about that either. I can always just switch back to my pencil tool, hold down Alt to sample that color, and then color it in. No big deal. It's an easy fix. Almost done. Alright, so once I have everything sort of flatted in, what I have here basically now is a complete outline of my character. So there's a few different ways you can mask. You can just control select or control click on that layer, and that'll basically select everything in your layer. So if I just make a new layer now, and let's see, new layer, and I'll control click that layer. So see, if I grab another color here, I'll only be painting inside of that selection. So that's one way to use it as a mask. The other way to use it as a mask, and I'll save this layer because I'll probably use it, but so like our little sketch stuff there, you'll see how I'm going out of the lines everywhere. If I just hold down my Alt button and kind of hover in between those two layers and click, it's basically all that information is still there, but it's using the layer below it to mask, so we don't see all that other stuff. And we still keep some of the sketchiness inside of our lines, which is kind of what I want. So that's another way to mask. And then there's also just making a selection, and then I can select my sketch layer and I can invert that selection. So I'll go to select, inverse, and then I can just hit delete, and that will just delete everything outside of that mask. So a lot of cool things you can do with this flat base layer once you create it, and it'll help a lot. So I'm going to pause here, and I'm going to skip to me flatting out everything in just basic grayscale colors, so I can really get like the tonality I want, and then we'll go into actually adding color and then showing some highlights and shadows and stuff like that.